Okay guys, now I'm going to show you how you can perform mediation analysis in R. Now this is the command they used. Sorry, let me print all this. This command allows us to have all numbers. This is for data importation. This command allows us to see whether our data were correctly imported in R. This you see country name, GDP, FDI, export. Okay, now it's okay. Data were correctly imported. This is to see the number of observations and the number of variables. Now, as you can see, we have 266 countries and the 4 variables, which are country name, GDP, FDI, and export. And this library allows us to see the missing values. Now, this command I execute. You see now export has a missing observation 57 observation of missing data, 20 representing 21%, this GDP 9%, FDI 8%. Now I'm going to delete missing observations. As you know, there are many ways of dealing with missing observations. You can replace missing observation by whether by means, whether by median, whether by mode. Now, as you can see here, after deleting missing data, you see now there is missing in our new data frame. There is no missing observation. Now, let's check how many variables we have. Now we have 204, and with the 4 variables. Now, I'm going to check whether our data are normally distributed. Now, as you can see, it is GDP is not normally distributed. Let's check with also FDI is not normally distributed. Exports the same. That means the implication of these findings is that we cannot use parametric test when we want to perform mediation analysis or inject effect analysis, as Barron and the Kenny procedures are parametric because are based on regression. This means we cannot use them because our data are not normally distributed. Because the data we get will be biased, the estimate coefficient and errors and so on will be biased, they will not be correct. That's why it is recommended to use non-parametric test or to use robust method. That is the result of this first analysis. Now, let's first check whether there is correlation in my data. Remember when I was talking about correlation, I said that when you found that data are correlated, you can perform whether regression analysis or you can perform mediation analysis. When data are not normally distributed, for instance, you can use non-parametric regression or you can use other non-parametric tests. Now let me see using non-parametric way to test whether our data are correlated. Now we're using Spearman correlation. As our data are not normally distributed, I have to use the non-parametric test. I use the Spearman correlation, and as you can see here, we have all our variables are correlated. Now let's use Piston Correlation when we suppose that our data are normally distributed, and when you look here, there is a higher correlation between GDP and FDI and GDP and export. But the most important is to analyze the relationship or the correlation between exports and FDI. Now you see there is a higher correlation between export and FDI. This may lead to the problem of multicollinearity. Remember, we have been talking about it in the presentation when I was presenting how to perform a regression analysis. And this may be an issue in our analysis because when you have a multicollinearity, it is an issue because you put in the same model variables which are highly correlated. Now, for instance, let's show you, even though it is not today's subject, how this occurs. Remember, the threshold we have been talking when there is multicollinearity was about 5. Now, as you can see here, the VIF now is greater than the threshold of 5%, and this model, or the result of this model, will not be used, as Barron follows linear regression. Now, as you can see also, the residual are not normally distributed, and this means also a great issue in linear regression. Now, let's remind you the 4 steps of in Barron and Kenny procedures. Now, the first step is that the first condition is that the coefficient of the regression of FDI as independent variable or GDP as dependent variable must be significant. This is the path for C. Let's remind you the figure. This one. The second condition is that the coefficient of the regression of FDI as independent variable or export as mediator variable must be significant, and this is what is path A. This one, this path, this one, this. And the third condition is that the coefficient of export is significantly significant once controlling the coefficient of FDI. That means when you regress FDI and export on GDP, the coefficient of export as mediator variable must be significant. This is when you combine here, and the last condition is that the relationship between FDI and GDP must be significantly reduced. That is this path. That means when in this regression here in this step, the coefficient of FDI must be significantly reduced. This path C, this path, this one. Okay, now let's perform this analysis and check whether the conditions are met or not. We use this process R, and this process R allows us to follow Barron and Kenny procedure. Now let's see. Let's run this comment. In this comment, as you can see, this is independent variable, this is independent variable, this is the mediator variable, and this is the dependent variable. Let's see if in our procedures all conditions are met or not. Let's see, we begin by here. This is the first condition, regressing FDI on GDP. Now, as you can see, FDI, the P value is significant. That the first condition is met. Let's fill path C, A, this one, this. When regressing FDI on export as on a mediator variable, let's see the coefficient. Here, as you can see, it is significant. Coefficient is this, and it is significant. Now let's check with the third condition. The third condition is this one. Look this comment. Regressing export and FDI on GDP, and you can see whether this export is coefficient is significant. As you can see here, it is highly significant, but this one also is significant. Okay, let's test the last condition, that the relationship between FDI and the GDP is significantly reduced. Let's see the coefficient of FDI. The coefficient of FDI here, as you can see, this one, it is 21 in this time. But remember, in the first relation, it was in the first regression, the coefficient of FDI on GDP was this one, 66. We come from 66 to 21. That we can say that this condition is met, because from 66 to 21 now there is a significant reduction. Now, as here when we are interpreting or in Barron procedures, when on this step, when this coefficient FDI remains significant, that means partial mediation. But when this coefficient FDI at this step is not significant, there is what we call full mediation. Now, when here we have a summary of those procedures. Now you can see total effect is this one is significant, path A it is significant, path B is significant, C is 21. Now look. Now there is partial mediation, as I said. Now, we can plot these results as we have a figure. We are trying to plot the results. Now this is the plot of the results. and you can also plot all the results. This is the plot. All those are coefficient of each regression. And now we can just, if you are preparing your data, you can present also theoretical diagram. These are theoretical diagram. And now we can use bootstrapping procedures, non-parametric way of analyzing it. Now this we do that using a mediation package. These are the linear regression. This is the first step in the Barron. This one, the first relationship between mediator variable and any variable, and this is the third step, regressing FDR and export on GDP. And same. Now we are going to make mediation. Now we are going to make a 500 simulation. This is mediator variable export. This is the independent variable, and this is to summarize the model to have the result. Now we have to wait because now the model will run around 500 times the simulations. We conducted 500 simulations. Okay, we have to wait a moment until we go to the results. Okay, what we can say now, this is a non-parametric test, but the result will be the same, but we will not have the same step as. So let's reduce this one so as to get full presentation of the result. Just I want on the same line. Okay, as you can see, this is average causal mediation effect, which is 45. And it's significant. This is indirect effect, what we call indirect effect, and this is average direct effect, the path C plane. This is total effect. Now you see we have the same result, almost the same result, and it is significant also. The proportion mediated is 67%. Remember when I was using, I show you how you can interpret when you use this procedure. I show you how you can interpret based on the variance. Let me show you where is the interpretation of this. This one. This is how you can, when you use mediation, this is how you will interpret. The variance accounted for will be used to interpret your result. When the variance accounted for is less than 20%, there is the indirect effect is not significant, therefore there is no mediation. If the variance accounted for is between 20% and 80%, there is a partial mediation. A variance accounted for value of greater than 80% implies full mediation according to these authors. And in this case, in our case here, we see now we are less than 80%, but greater than 20%. That means partial mediation. Now you see the conclusion is the same as in the first analysis using all procedures of Barron and Kenny. Now remember, our data were not normally distributed. That means when our data are not normally distributed, you cannot use this parametric test or this because now this mediation and the process give same results. Now, as our data are not normally distributed, we have to find a package or a way of doing our causal mediation analysis, but finding a better package which can handle this missing outliers so as to get a better result. Now we use this package LobMed, which allows to make low-based mediation. Now this one, this command is just to standardize our data. This is to delete the first column because it is not numerical. And the command we use here is this one to perform low-based mediation. And this allows us to get the results. Then we have to wait a moment so as to get the results. We have to wait a moment. Okay, now we can see here. Look, now this is the model. Low-based bootstrapping test for indirect effect via regression. Now you can see here. This is, for instance, the regressing outcome variable export. Now this means regressing FDI on export. This is the third step in Barron and Kenny, the third step. Now you see now the coefficient is significant. Now you see those variable observations which were considered as the outliers and which were weighted. Now in this model, now look, this is the third step in Barron Kenny, regression of export and FDI on GDP. Now as you can see here, export is only significant, but now FDI is not significant. This means, in this case, based on this analysis, there is partial mediation. Full mediation. This result indicates full mediation because FDI is not significant in this step. This means the direct effect of FDI disappears. This means full mediation. This means implies that the FDI contributes to GDP by increasing export. Remember, when you consider the equation of GDP, normally export is included in the equation. But if FDI is not included in the equation, which seems to be normal. But remember, when you are discussing your result, you have to base your findings on the prior study. Remember, I show you the previous studies. Remember this one, Maming and Martin indicated that the direct effect of FDI on GDP is small when FDI is considered in isolation, but indirect effect is more significant than direct effect. And we consider also this funding, and which means in a nutshell, our result, our findings are consistent with this statement or the prior studies. Okay, thank guys. This is the end of my presentation.